Urban legends and myths are staples in our telling of stories. They tend to enroot themselves in our histories and culture, even to a point in which they become an essential quality of who we are, tending to confirm moral standards, reflect prejudice, make sense of social anxieties, or explain phenomena. For the purpose of this video, it's best to establish what the meaning of these two terms are. An urban legend is a form of modern folklore in which stories told are thought to be true, but are likely untrue or distortions and exaggerations of the truth. A myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, typically involving supernatural beings or events. A simpler definition could be considered in this scenario a widely held but false belief or idea. It only makes sense that the cyberpunk genre, a dystopian setting that tends to use the very real world as its framework and to predict reality, would in some sense mimic or even share many of these concepts and stories. This obviously applies as well to Cyberpunk 2077, created by CD Projekt Red, as well as its predecessors produced by Mike Pondsmith and his company Artazorian Games. I do want to state as well that this video may be named Myths and Urban Legends, but some may blur the line to more of a conspiracy. It's hard to exactly pinpoint each, so in technicality this video is more of a Conspiracies, Myths, and Urban Legends of Cyberpunk video. A world so enriched in tech makes it extremely susceptible to the spread of urban legends, and moreover, they become much scarier when your brain is hooked up into this vast network. I'm sure you'll find it no surprise that many of these will be interlinked with the net and its netrunners. Furthermore, you probably wouldn't be surprised for me to tell you that many of these urban legends have a shared source, Raish Bartmoss. Yeah, the Raish Bartmoss, mastermind behind the data crash who you presumably find dead in a junkyard. So, without further delay, let's take a deep dive into Cyberpunk 2077's conspiracies, myths, and urban legends. Just to be thorough, I want to start off by explaining a few ideas that are relatively obvious. As a result of Cyberpunk's world being a dystopian prediction of ours, it shares a large portion of our real-life urban legends and myths. I'm sure you'd have an idea if you've read the Cyberpunk version 3 books. Though they are no longer canon, it gives an insight to more of a conspiracy-esque community. Things like vampires and werewolves being locked in an eternal struggle between their factions, ghosts that haunt the real world, Bigfoot, Yetis, etc. Because of Cyberpunk's world branching off in the 20th century, being 5 decades out from now, and also the data crash resulting in a lot of lost information, you just don't see a lot of connection firsthand. But there is a shard that connects the two realities in a famous story titled The Myth of a tale in Greek mythology about a man who died on a battlefield and returned to life 9 days later, recounting what happened in the afterlife. The net is a gateway to hell, or even hell itself. Discussion on just what the net exactly is has been around since it was initially discovered, created, or whatever you like to call it. Many might look at it as something humanity created. It will only exist as long as our technology is around. Would it be reasonable though to view it as something entirely else, even a different plane of existence? One that overlaps with our known reality, yet is only accessible at the moment through the use of net-running tech? Well, this idea isn't unheard of. Even Raish Bartmoss himself ultimately wanted a way to merge the reality we know with the net he loves. But what if the net is something much more sinister than just an alternate reality overlapping ours? What if it's a realm that can only be correlated as hell itself? This is something that Moral Rock's Maximum Mike speaks over in relation to one of his net-running friends. In his own words, his friend is no kook, and when she has something to say, it should be heard. He claims that the net itself is hell, and Raish Bartmoss opened the door. That he didn't even create the demons, he had simply found and named them, stating that Netwatch has its origin in the Vatican and the Black Wall sings in Aramaic. This might initially sound like crazy talk, but I don't believe it's entirely baseless. Sources connected with Maximum Mike already tend to be reliable, but even Mike Pondsmith himself has hinted in the past at Raish discovering the demons. Alongside this, can here Gary the Prophet call cyberspace pandemonium, which translated from Greek means all demons, and is even the name for the capital of hell itself. And in one of the loading screens about the Black Wall, we can view a text that states, some call this space the domain of rogue AIs, others call it data hell. We can even take a look at the existence of Lilith, an apparent rogue AI that Maelstrom attempt to summon using a sacrificial and bloody ritual. Lilith is also known as the Night Monster, Night Hag, or even Queen of the Night. I'll ask you all, would you dare venture into the net knowing this information? The net is an alternate plane of reality. This was obviously briefly touched upon, but Raish Bartmoss has further explanation for it in his Guide of the Net sourcebook. He claims the multiverse is comprised of several planes. There's the physical, which is where our reality tends to fall into, spiritual, emotional, divine, financial, and finally, the information plane, otherwise named the net, further reinforcing the idea that Bartmoss discovered it. The plane of information is what he considers the real universe, and the physical plane exists only to allow us access into it. The net is found on the plane of communication and information. It is made up of all the telecommunication devices and electronic processors the world over and beyond. Yes, even computer-activated blenders are part of the net, though they make for some boring net runs. What makes these planes even more mysterious are the reality warping consequences of them. Along the net's Rust Belt region, there are spots that seem to be literally rusting, and when these flakes were pried up, the universe reformed to fit what was removed. Maybe it's the plane of reality and its rust creating the Mandela. It is rumored that there is a place somewhere beyond the bounds of any region where the human AIs go and congregate. Now remember, when I'm talking human AIs, I'm talking people killed while interfaced, people extracted into disk, people victimized by the Soul Killer program, and other such weird souls. All human AIs are, or at least were, human. So there's supposedly this place, which they call Shangri-La, or that everyone else calls the Ghost Town, where they go to socialize and hang out, and pretend they're still human among their own kind. It's supposed to be at the north end of Canada, the Yukon, or the Northwest Territories, or maybe even eastern Alaska. Holt said there are about 24 or so people at the ghost town. Other reports said there are hundreds of human AIs, maybe thousands. The Blue-Eyed People. Within the Cyberpunk Red sourcebook, you can find an entry that speaks on urban legends of blue-eyed people who are rogue AIs that have taken control of human bodies and are secretly manipulating the highest levels of politics and finance. Connie Silverhand himself promotes this idea after Dream On, during which we can see the elusive Mr. Blue Eyes watching over us.
Good night. So, thoughts?
What would you do?
Somehow I doubt it's people who are behind this.
Find out what the
So
blockbuster
aliens?
you get.
Very funny. You're too young to remember this, but not so long ago, people talked about rogue AIs prowling cyberspace.
So, not aliens.
Doesn't matter who. What matters is that guy decided to take up the gauntlet. My man.
So, is Mr. Blue Eyes truly connected to these urban legends? Or is it just a coincidence? The Zen Master. The appearances of a mysterious monk has been spreading throughout Night City. An alleged Zen Master. He appears to only those he wishes to be seen by and disappears at will. Maximum Mike of Morio Radio has been getting contacted on these mysterious events.
So people, listen up, I've got a story to share with you. Recently, I've been hearing about this monk that's been walking around Night City streets, healing the sick, but only those he deems worthy. Some of my listeners seem convinced that it's none other than Rache Bartmoss. Rache Bartmoss. Yeah, you know, the guy, the chief architect of the net, and later its badass destroyer. The rumor has always been he got taken out by a killsat in the early days of the Fourth Corporate, but no one ever took responsibility for that strike. Is it possible Bartmoss set his creations wild and faked his own death? Did he bring down the net he created because it had turned into another tool the corporations could use to track us and to ultimately completely subjugate us? Think about it.
Even Misty, within 2077, receives a message from the handle Tinker that details their interactions with this figure. He finds himself in a similar situation with an alleged Zen Master. Nothing seems quite extraordinary about these encounters, beyond the fact that the Zen Master disappears after. So what is this? Mass hysteria? A magical monk? A rogue AI? Or is it just a complete coincidence that these stories coincide? The concept of werewolves is widespread in folklore, urban legends, and more. The majority of people around you would be able to answer exactly what they are: an individual who can shapeshift into a wolf, usually depicted as a mix of wolf and human features. Well, it's no secret that these creatures are claimed to exist within the Cyberpunk universe. Let's know what Maximum Mike has to say.
So listen up, people. I've got a story to tell you. I heard something recently from a nomad friend of mine. She was telling me about some strange stuff happening out in the Badlands of the East. She said she ran across another nomad patrol. 5 people, all mauled to death by a wild animal. But the thing is, folks, there haven't been mountain lions out there in almost a century, wolves in even longer. So what could it be? Well, I'm reminded of a story. Story told me by an old Murk I used to know. He once took a job that had him fly over to Romania, looking for some corpo's missing brother. Search took him to an old village, and they decided to camp for the night before searching the woods in the morning. That night, they could hear barking, howls in the distance. Even though they knew it had to be wild dogs, the team could barely get any sleep that night. Then, just before dawn, they were attacked by animals. But they weren't dogs. They were werewolves. No, listeners, I haven't lost it. I mean it. They were werewolves. But not the ones of legend and not the ones in old Hollywood flat screen flicks. These bad doggies came out of a lab. See, it turns out that EBM had decided to back some rather unsavory sorts in an attempted coup of the government and offer these gene freaks as part of the deal. Of course, it didn't work. The coup was crushed a few months later and EBM isn't around anymore either. The question remains, where did EBM get their knockoff wolfmen? They never had much of a gene hacking division, so they must have come from some other corp.
With the claims by Gary the Prophet about nomads being werewolves, alongside the disturbing human experiments from Biotechnica, would it truly be outside the realm of possibility that these werewolves really are in the Badlands? You might want to be careful next time you take a trip during a full moon. This video wouldn't be complete without the inclusion of vampires directly after the discussion of werewolves. However, there's a lot to dig out behind these creatures in relation to the cyberpunk universe, so you will want to hear this. This is more of an urban legend throughout the community itself. A lot of talk on the concept of underground corpo vampires and tunnels that run throughout Night City. This originally sprouted due to a post by an allegedly disgruntled CDPR employee on Reddit. Claimed there used to be a huge underground part of the city that the public never got to see because it, quote unquote, looked ugly to the execs. It was fucking awesome and felt like the Nosferatu path on Vampire the Masquerade. Alongside this, through the use of mods and messing with the game files, you could find a few portions of cave/tunnels unused in the base game, though they remain small and contain basically no assets or graphics. It was eventually claimed by CDPR that this was a fake post spreading false rumors. Or are we to know that this is entirely true? But the post itself actually never claimed there was vampires like many said. The area was just being compared to a game that contained vampires. We do get some conspiracies on the Arasakas being vampires though. I'll play that for you so you don't feel completely cheated out of the idea of vampires in 2077.
Okay, people, listen up. This one comes to me from a listener who raises a great question. And he suggests an answer. How does the Arasaka family live so long? What about the Lucases? Or half a dozen other high-profile corporal families that are pushing 200 years at this point? His answer? They're vampires. The world is ruled by vampires. Well, folks, I can't say I haven't thought about it that way, but let's consider the evidence. There's the obvious. They seem to live forever and they look good doing it. Have you seen the documentary recently about Hanako Arasaka? She doesn't look a day over 40, but she's currently pushing her 8th decade. They drink blood. Yeah, checks out. They drain this city for sure. They sleep in coffins. Well, I do happen to know Saburo Arasaka spent the better part of this century in a medical tank to keep him alive. What do the med techs call it? Ah, the sarcophagus. Yeah, it's more of a mummy thing, but close enough. They can only be killed with a wooden stake. Yeah, I'm not sure about this one.
Just as much as Batman himself is considered an urban legend everywhere outside of Gotham City, Murk Man is the urban legend of Night City. After completing Ghost Town and reaching 40 street cred, a quest by the name Murk Man returns again, once more, forever, will appear on your map in the unfinished tunnels where Raffen Schiff's hideout was. There, you can find a jet black, ray-filled Caliburn. However, what many might have missed was a shard detailing who the previous owner was. Don't be afraid. There's nothing there. That's what they always told me. The night my parents were murdered, I knew I had seen something in the dark of that night. I searched for it a long time, cloaked myself in the darkness, learning it, understanding it, merging with it. I realized in its depths, where light cannot escape, there's only one thing to fear: myself. I became the shadow. I became vengeance. I became the man Night City doesn't deserve. I became Murk Man. I deliver vengeance, destruction, and justice necessary to save this dying city from itself. And I will do so until the day my heart no longer beats inside my chest. So, just what exactly happened to Murk Man? Was he killed in his fight against crime? Did he skip town out of fear? Or is he on a mission that takes him elsewhere? It's difficult to know right now, but maybe someday we will discover the story behind his abandoned Murkmobile. This is all I have for you today in relation to Cyberpunk 2077's myths and urban legends / conspiracies. This, however, isn't all that Cyberpunk has to offer. If you'd like to learn more about its vast lore, check out my other content and subscribe to keep up to date. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'd appreciate hearing all your thoughts down below. Thank you to all my channel members on screen that continue to take that extra step in support of my content. I'm extremely thankful to have a community of trooms to watch my videos. Let me know how you all are doing. As always, make sure to have a great week, and I'll see you all later.